able to take South Africa into confidence with the plan that we have for to reboot this economy. Thank you very much, Chair.
Can we ask Yako, Honorable Yako?
Thank you, Chairperson. Put my video on. My is really terrible.
You're still very faint, Honorable Yako.
Okay, I'm gonna. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's not very clear, but try. Actually, let's see if we can hear you.
Okay. Basically, I feel that with the presentations that we've been receiving from the DTIC as far as COVID, I'm not convinced that the department knows exactly what's what in terms of what it has done, in terms of what is happening, in terms of the PPE, the delivery of PPE. There's no control, there's no centralism of power, and there's no centralism of management as far as what goes where and how. And I feel that as a committee, we are given a broad sky view of nothing. And it doesn't make me comfortable that the department is in charge or in control of any kind of action with that happens in terms of its entities, in terms of the economy of South Africa as a whole. And I'm worried that we are not being, as a department, that's the engine of the economy of South Africa. We're not in control, and that perturbs me very much, because we are going to have an economic meltdown, and we're going to have a situation where we are unable to find each other. With regards to the Competition Commission, I'm wondering, I think as a committee, we need to discuss how we can give more control to the Competition Commission to execute its powers fully without the interference of the minister and without the interference of the department, so that they can push through with their investigations and make sure that whatever outcome, they can be able to see through all the way. And lastly, I really do believe that without a state-owned company that produces PPE for this country, that's centralized, there's no way we can say this is what the department has done, because there's no way we can track through all of the procurement of PPEs, all of the disbursement of the PPEs. And as we have seen, there's a lot of corruption around PPEs in South Africa at the moment. And that leaves a lot to be desired. And for me, it's a concern. So that is my comment, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Secretary, I'm sure we have covered all the members that have raised the point. And I'm sure we'll actually then, for Mantashe, have the chat in trying to pick up on the questions. Can I actually then go back to the economist and the DG on comments on issues that were raised? Honorable Hannibal, Steve Hannibal, and DG.
Yes, Chair. Stephen will start with the response, and then I will follow up. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Honourable Chair, and thanks to the honourable members for the questions and comments. Perhaps maybe to start with Honourable Cuthbert's questions around scrap metal, as well as the Competition Commission. I can certainly indicate that we will investigate where the complaint is with regard to price gouging at SAA. Of course, it is also the case that price gouging is only considered excessive pricing if there isn't a associated increase in the cost. And with some of the SAA repatriation flights, there were extra costs involved in disinfecting the aeroplane, in providing PPE to the crew, and in many cases the airplanes also couldn't fly at their full capacity. We would have to investigate it. We would have to ask the Commission to come back and give us a sense of it. But just to signal that price gouging is where there's no link to the costs, the input costs associated with the particular activity. But we'll come back to the committee with the Competition Commission to provide some inputs on that. Honourable Cuthbert, on the issue of the scrap metal, it's a very difficult situation. The idea is not to entirely block exports of scrap metal, and the export tax allows us to do that by working the economics of it. So providing a price raising effect by leveraging a export tax on the scrap metal means that companies in the scrap metal sector are hopefully incentivized to provide the scrap metal to local steel mills and steel producers without it being a blanket export ban. So we would argue that the export tax is likely to be a more effective measure which balances the need of the steel mills to get access to scrap metal at a good price, while also allowing the scrap metal merchants to continue to operate and continue to export if the economics of it makes sense for them. So if they're able to pay the export tax and still make a profit through exporting, then there's nothing to stop them doing so. So we would argue that the export tax is a much more balanced and efficient way of addressing the challenges in the scrap sector. Of course, it is a concern that our infrastructure is being, in some cases, undermined by criminal elements. And of course, the challenge for us is that we need to ensure that our steel sector continues to be supported. What we don't want going into an infrastructure build would be for us to need to import all of our steel. And as I think honourable members will probably be aware, South Africa doesn't have the logistical capabilities to be able to import all steel imports if we were to see the loss of significant local steel making capacity. So we wouldn't be able to import all our steel if the local steel mills were to be closed as a result of the economic environment. So it's a very difficult balancing act that we're needing to find. Honourable Chair, Honourable Mulder's comments around the regulations. I think perhaps we would need to come back on some of those. We can certainly provide more detail on what's allowed under level 2, but I think it is and a number of honourable members have raised the issue. If we hadn't implemented the hard lockdown at level 5, the counterfactual is that we just don't know what the overall impact would have been. And we may well have had a situation where thousands, hundreds of thousands South Africans could lose their lives if the pandemic had taken hold across South Africa at the same scale that it's taken hold in, for example, Brazil or the United States, even the United Kingdom. So although obviously there are lessons to be learnt around whether the regulations were too harsh, whether the regulations went too far, it's very easy to make those assessments after the event. At the time when we were facing the risk of literally hundreds of thousands of people losing their lives, government took a very careful calculation based on the modeling, the epidemiological modeling that was provided by a range of professionals. And the view was that we needed a relatively harsh lockdown to prevent the pandemic really taking hold in South Africa. I would certainly argue, and I think many health professionals would argue as well, that the lockdown has been effective in limiting the spread of the virus particularly in our impoverished communities. Honourable Chair, Honourable Macpherson has raised a number of issues. I think again on this area, and DG Lionel will guide me. I think the specific questions around the National Ventilator Project, we can come back with further information on that, the exact numbers, etc. I think the only thing that I would want to say from my side is that we're talking about developing a local manufacturing capability for a relatively sophisticated piece of equipment. And to do that in the space of even 1 year is actually quite unusual. So yes, there is the possibility that the need for these ventilators, these CPAP machines, will not be as great today as we thought when the ventilator project was being developed. But that doesn't mean that there won't still be demands for the CPAP machines elsewhere in the world. And so if we follow the epidemiologists' views on how the pandemic is likely to take hold in the rest of Africa, it's almost certain that we will see a growth in infections across the African continent. We've already seen it in our neighboring countries in SADC. And so the opportunity to export these CPAP machines will certainly be there. And the technology that's been developed as a result of it is certainly going to be helpful to South Africa in the long term as well. So, we could argue that, yes, it would have been better if we could get production going in a shorter period of time. But the reality is that even getting this project off the ground in the 3 months that we've had is an absolutely, it's perhaps the fastest development process that we've seen in South Africa in decades. So I think we do have to acknowledge that we were working from a relatively low base in terms of local manufacturing of both the parts that go into a CPAP, both the overall CPAP itself. Most of these products are imported. The CPAP certainly from the United States, other respirators from other parts of the world. And the risk is that we would have had a really serious situation if we didn't make those investments. But it's a little bit like saying, should we invest in a new innovative product in the hope that it will be a success? But in many cases, government has to de-risk these kinds of initiatives. And that really is the role of a Department of Science and Innovation to take the opportunity and to run with it to ensure that we address what could have been a very, very serious crisis in the economy and in South Africa's healthcare sector. In terms of as it's called, the booze ban, Honourable Chair, I don't think it's really relevant what my personal opinion is on the matter. Government needed to assess both the risks and the potential impact of continuing the ban. What I can say is that from a DTIC perspective, a significant amount of research was undertaken, significant inputs were made into the various structures within government, but those are decisions that are taken at the National Coronavirus Command Council and decisions taken by Cabinet. Our inputs, I'm sure, were taken into consideration, but the overall risks to South Africans, to the health system, took precedence at the time, and those risks were given the highest priority, again, because lives were at stake. People's lives were potentially literally at stake. And so I think we have to perhaps respect that a Cabinet took those decisions based on the best information it had. As I say, I'm happy to tell you my personal opinion on the booze ban, but it's actually relatively irrelevant to today's discussion because the government and Cabinet took a particular view on that. Honourable Mbuyane, a number of very, very difficult questions have been raised. I think we'll need to come back with some of the hard information. Some of my colleagues are on the call who have been dealing with the investment projects. They may wish to come in to talk about some of those. Particularly on the black industrialists and the companies assisted and the provincial breakdown. I think honourable members will be aware that DDG Mabitsha Thompson is able to provide a lot of that detailed information, which companies, where they are located, which sectors they're in. So perhaps you'll allow her to come in on that as well. Ambassador Xavier Karim is also on the line, and perhaps he would want to just come in on the AFCFTA processes. If I can perhaps, Honourable Mbuyane, just touch on the Competition Commission issues. I think it's important to make the point that the role of the Commission is not to punish necessarily bad behavior. It's to actually change bad behavior. And so it's not a punitive approach. And so the 10% fine may be too low at the moment, but at the same time, we wouldn't want the fine to be so high that companies are actually forced out of business. What we need to do is to change the conduct of those companies and be very vigilant and very forceful in our engagements with those companies where conduct is out of line with the Competition Act. So we certainly need to do that. Honourable Chair, if I can perhaps just touch on a point that both Honourable McPherson and Thring made around the 200 billion Rand Guarantee Fund. I did try to allude to it in the presentation a little bit. The fund sits outside of the Department of Trade and Industry. It sits with the Reserve Bank and the National Treasury. We have made inputs into the operation of the fund. We've made comments on the extent to which we think the fund could be operating more flexibly, but it doesn't reside actually with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. And we receive no funding from the 200 billion Rand. The funding that we've provided into the economy has been from DTI's own budget. We do think that there probably are elements of learning that will unfold. Many other countries have also not gotten these kinds of loan guarantee funds right. It may well be that we need to continue working with our colleagues at National Treasury to improve particularly the turnaround time and particularly the risk aversion that some commercial banks may be applying. To the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware that National Treasury is not providing the guarantee and the support that's required as was agreed when the fund was first formulated and conceptualized. Honourable Chair, perhaps DG October would want to come in also on the issue of the PPE. Perhaps the only thing I would be able to say from my side is that the way the Constitution of South Africa is set up is that we have 3 spheres of government. It's not a tiered system. There are 3 spheres, equal spheres at local government, provincial and national level. And at the moment, we don't have a centralized procurement system in South Africa that would allow the National Treasury to direct procurement. It may well be argued, as a number of commentators have argued, that a decentralized system creates the space for potential corruption. That may well be correct, but at the moment we simply don't have that centralized procurement system. It may well be that for localization of goods like PPE, a centralized procurement system would be the best way to go. But at the moment, we simply don't have those tools at the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. All we can do is to put in place the designations as we've done in the past, and then we need to intensively monitor those designations and ensure that where they've been provided, that procuring entities like other departments and agents of the state actually follow those procurement prescripts. But Honourable Chair, perhaps I could stop there and hand over to DG October. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. DG?
Yes, Chair, thanks. I think Stephen has dealt quite comprehensively with a range of issues, and as he indicated, we will definitely investigate and follow up on some of the concerns raised by, legitimate concerns raised by members. Let me just deal very broadly with 2 issues. The one is the very topical issue of procurement. And as I said, as was reported with regards to DTIC and its entities, we have responded to parliamentary questions where we have been given full disclosure about each and every company and every cent that has been spent by the DTIC. And we can give, again, with assurance that there is zero corruption within the DTIC and its entities with regards to that. As Stephen indicated, we are obviously one department, albeit an important department within the economic cluster and within the National Joint Command. And as you know, we have been very active in the National Joint Command, which provides reports and to the National Command Council based at the Reserve Bank, and a number of our staff have been practically full-time, including Stephen, Evelyn, and others. What we have done is, as I said, because of the laws of the country, we have really been one of the champions around local procurement of PPEs and direct purchase from the suppliers and to cut out the middlemen. And as Stephen will tell you, we've been pushing very hard for government to centralize procurement. And as I said, unfortunately, because of the current laws, which we're going to have to amend in future, but there are too many leakages with regards to procurement. But where we have had an influence, for example, with request to surgical masks and others, for example, over 1 million masks was procured by Department of Education. We worked directly then, because we worked with the DG of Education, we managed to bring in the direct suppliers, the clothing industry into that. We brought in SACTU, we brought in the Department of Education, we set up a special team with our Invest SA, where we then ensured that the work was given directly to manufacturers with regards to that. But as you said, we weren't maybe successful in all the other ones because of the decentralization to provinces and to local structures and so on. And then just to conclude, I think Honorable Jaco makes the very important point about the role that we have and ought to play within this debate. I can just say, with regards to the overall recovery package, the 500 billion that has been announced, and especially I think there's been the legitimate concerns around the big funds. What I can say is that we haven't always been successful, but as a department from day one, we have been able to push both government to adopt an activist approach to provide the support package to firms. Secondly, we have also pushed hard for government to provide support to workers. And as you know, the 40 billion paid out by the Department of Labor, that is partly as the result of our constant pushing for the opening up of the UIF and the TERS fund. And then secondly, we have also been very active in pushing government to be able to open up to vulnerable workers. So the enhancement of the child grant, the benefit to the informal sector, that is as the result of the statistics produced within the DTIC. And we've been able to, as I said, we haven't always been successful, but we do agree with Honorable Jaco that we must move away from this tendency, which has sometimes been prevalent in our national discourse of a do-nothing state. We believe we need to be an activist state, and that's why we have been actively pushing industrialization and especially localization. Let me conclude on Honorable Boyani and others have raised this concern about the investment commitments, and as you know, a number of companies have announced some concerns. With regard, for example, the SA breweries, Heineken and Consul Glass, they have indicated that they have stalled their investment. All I can say is now we are in contact with those companies, and as I said, I mean, they immediately, they have not announced that they will proceed with those investments, but they have told us, and as you know, it is a fact that economics is driven not by charity or subjective feelings, it's by hard economic laws of supply and demand. If demand returns, for example, for bottling, and as I said, our Puza nation was very, demand was high since the ban was lifted yesterday. And if demand returns, companies like Consul Glass will be able to upgrade their investment. But on the other front, as I kicked off, with our concern was to preserve our industrial base, I can't say there is some very, very positive news. As was announced, Mercedes-Benz is proceeding in East London, is proceeding with the expansion of the plant and the production of the C-Class Mercedes-Benz, and we brought in on 2 flights the experts who have proceeded with that investment. Also, for Honorable Tring in the KZN, he was boasting about the weather. The other thing they can boast about is in Stanger, in Kwadakuza, Chief Albert Lutuli's hometown, Hesto Harnesses have now proceeded to get the land from Transnet, and they have guaranteed now they will be employing an additional 3,300 workers in terms of their production of harnesses for the Ford assembly. That is on top of the current more than 2,300 workers, which is currently employed in Stanger. So they are proceeding and busy with the recruitment of 3,000 additional employees in KwaZulu-Natal. Then secondly, as I indicated, the auto program, in terms of reviving the manufacturing sector, we had a very good section with the PPGI and all the master plans. So we are bringing all the master plans back on track. And again, as I indicated to you, Ford has announced that we will keep the contract to be the sole supplier of the new Ford Ranger. And they have committed to the next 50 years in South Africa. And as I indicated, they are proceeding with their 13 billion rand investment. And I can say that on August the 7th, construction commenced at the Tshwane Silverton plant. And in the next few weeks and months, we will be building 18 new factories to supply the Ford plant, in addition to the Ford expansion. And there will be about 6,000 workers employed in that construction, which has already commenced. And then at the end of it, we will permanently employ 12,000 people in the Tshwane SEZ. So there are some really optimistic news that we have been able to get through by preserving a part of our industrial base. But as indicated, we do expect very negative growth. There has been unemployment. Consumer demand is likely to fall. But as I said, we were just hoping and we could limit some of the damage. Chair, I don't know if Xavier is around, but also just to report that we are actively now working. There was a summit of SADC. We are actively working to get the ACFTA and the Continental Free Trade Agreement back on track. And we hope to, by December, to conclude everything. Our colleague, Wamkele Mene, has taken up his post in Ghana as the new Secretary General of the ACFTA. So we will be hoping out that. So we hope to expedite the African integration agenda, and we hope to position South Africa as the principal supplier of PPEs, of private companies and others, to be able to be the sole or a dominant supplier for demand on the continent. Chair, I'll leave it at that then.
Okay. Let me just actually just check, Secretary, before I proceed. Let me just say that before we take the next round of comments from members, that in the changing of the meetings in terms of remitted bills, which we're supposed to hear today and we moved it to yesterday, the reason was that the minister would be in cabinet. And as we speak, the minister is in cabinet. So let me just say as well, it may be actually quite important that on the issues raised by Honorable Cuthbert, there's communication that he refers to, I think about the SAA, if I'm not mistaken. One was actually thinking, Honorable Cuthbert, that it might actually help to the communication that we have initiated, looking at the issue of pricing, when you can be able to then just share. The DG has actually committed to follow through and investigate and give feedback on that issue as your question. But I think it will be important to be able to get you to share with the committee your communication on the basis of the issue that you have raised with the stakeholders that you have engaged. So it's quite important, because it's raised in our meeting, that we actually get you to share that, so that at least when the DG follows through, at least we do have an idea of that communication that we initiated as a member of our portfolio committee. Let me say further then, there are issues of oversight that I thought DG, we can be able to actually raise and be able to just check if that would actually be the best way of how we can get updates on progress moving forward in our oversight responsibility as the portfolio committee to the department and the entities. So there are a few areas that I would actually be speaking to after taking the next round of questions. So maybe just to conclude, just to say, one was actually suggesting if we have actually clear areas where we would say these are so many issues we have to look at, let's actually see if in terms of oversight, can we be able to actually engage the department and entities using those areas of engagement as areas where we should be able to give updates on progress depending on what actually is happening on the ground. So we will take a round now in the conclusion on the round of questions. Secretariat, I was just thinking one will raise the few areas just to make a suggestion of, blocks of areas that we may have to focus so that we are more focused in terms of updates on progress relating to issues of oversight of entities and the department. Can I take further hands if ever there are any, Secretariat?
Chair, Mr. Hannibal raised his hand, so I don't know if you want to respond to questions before the next one, or can we proceed with the next one and then respond to the questions in the next round? Okay,
let me just check with Hannibal.
Honourable Chair, it was to inquire with you whether we've got the DDG responsible for incentives on the call, and she can talk to the issue of the guarantee fund at the Reserve Bank and Treasury. And then we also have Ambassador Xavier Karim, who could talk to the AFCFTA. And then if time allows, I can also give a quick update on the ventilator numbers that I've just received from the Minister's office.
Okay.
Chair, may I proceed? I received the questions from Ms. Mantashe. If I may read it to the record, Chair.
Okay. So can we then do this, that you will read the chat of Mantashe? And on my part, I think I will just highlight the issues that I thought it would be important to share, just on the issues of ensuring oversight. And then we can actually then pick up on the comments as suggested by the Chief Economist.
Chair, and there's further members who might like to ask additional questions, Chair, follow after I read Ms. Mantashe's questions.
Okay, let's do this then, Secretariat. Let's allow the Chief Economist and the colleagues to respond to the previous question. Then you are going to read the chat. I'll highlight my issues and take further questions and try and round up after that. Hannibal?
Thank you, Chair. Just to respond to the issues around the National Ventilator Project, I can confirm that the project has been funded by the Solidarity Fund. Of course, members will be aware that the DTI contributed some financial resources to kickstart the Solidarity Fund, but the major costs associated with the National Ventilator Project have been funded through the Solidarity Fund. And I can also confirm that around about 2,000 units of the ventilator, of the CPAP machine, have been produced. They are currently available, and further production is continuing. So although we haven't reached the 10,000 target, we are well on the way to it. And of course, as members will be aware, once production starts, the economies of scale will allow us to increase quite quickly. So that's all from my side. Chair, if you'll allow DDG Mabicha Thompson and Ambassador Karim just to speak as well.
Yes, they can continue.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. And good morning to the honorable members. I think just to confirm that, yes, indeed, we are looking very closely at the take-up of the fund as offered by the Reserve Bank, and the Chief Economist has clarified that it is not a fund that we manage, but of course, because it supports industry, it in some ways affect the work that we do. And we've had several engagements with a number of banks. Our latest engagements were with Standard Bank, with FNB, Nedbank, ABSA, and also Al Barak Bank, where we were talking about how do we deal with issues that they are finding with the funding that the funding support that they ought to receive from the Reserve Bank, and how do we overcome those with some of the additional funding that we could perhaps provide to them on a project support basis. The issues here are part of the issues that come with a guarantee scheme, where the Reserve Bank, of course, has to make sure that banks are not just lending to everyone, including maybe people that may not qualify, because there is a guarantee that is being provided, and then balancing that with the pragmatism of supporting industry in a very challenging period. So as Stephen has alluded to, there are learnings, and it's not really a matter that is confined just to South Africa. We're seeing the same thing in various other countries, where all of us are engaged in this difficult decisions of stimulating economies and having to adjust our risk appetite against a very tight fiscus. And I think though we're hoping that we as the DTI would be having some measure of a working relationship, a direct working relationship with the banks to help them with adjusting their risk appetite, number one, and then we collaborate on specific projects, particularly in manufacturing, where all of them raise the fact that because of the lack of, or rather the reduced profitability of manufacturing, it is now really a sector for them that is very risky. So that is why we've engaged with in those discussions. We will provide in writing a full report of companies that have been supported during this period by ourselves, by all the entities that report to the DTI, including Black industrialists, as the question was posed by Honorable Mbuyane. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's have the other colleague following.
Thank you very much, Chair. And good morning to everyone. There was a question on the progress on the AFCFTA, and as the DG has indicated, the timetable for our negotiations on the AFCFTA were delayed. There was a timetable of intense negotiations set out for February to the end of May, with the hope that we would be able to operationalize the AFCFTA and begin preferential trading on the 1st of July this year. But with the disruption of the pandemic, those negotiations were suspended due to the lockdown, due to travel restrictions around the continent. And so the negotiations effectively were suspended. There was a decision that was taken at the heads of state level to shift the date, the target date for operationalizing the AFCFTA to the 1st of January. That decision does have a qualification that this is an objective, but it's contingent on how the pandemic evolves across the continent. But we have a target date now of the 1st of January to try to complete the work on the AFCFTA. And this work is primarily around completing negotiations on rules of origin and making tariff offers. So there are discussions ongoing, trying to see how best we can meet those new dates. And so we're working towards the 1st of January next year to operationalize the AFCFTA. Ongoing work, Chair. Thanks very much.
Okay. I'm sure it actually covers the issues, Haniva. Okay.
Yes, Chair.
All right. Secretary, let me just take you through the issues because I was just wanting to make a suggestion. And on my side is not the issue of questions. It's more on issues of what we may have to look at as the way of managing the process moving forward. So I think DG and the team, it's more on the issue of our oversight responsibility to the department and entities. I want to just say, in an absence of actually what term one can use, that maybe the first part one was actually able to look at in the report that we're given, because in the presentation we have gone through it. There are areas that we know would be coming through. One was actually suggesting, the first one, to look at the impact of the funding that is provided to business for reviving the economy. I think that's the first point DG1 was actually thinking. Maybe when we actually look at the reports, we may actually have that issue as a main pillar of what we speak to, and then be able to actually run the details of what we're actually doing and what is actually the progress and what are challenges we actually have in that space. That's the first point. The second one, I thought it may be important as well to say, the second point, we should look at ensuring localization in the manufacturing of local procurement of the essential goods required for minimizing the spread of COVID-19, such as the personal protective equipment. So I'm just saying, as a second point, one was actually thinking, DG, this might actually be quite helpful to say, this is the focus. We would actually want to see what we have done already, see how we continue, improve, and actually capacitate and grow that space. Because we actually has picked it up as critical area, as an oversight issue for department and entity. It's something that is quite strategic for us to be able to give some attention and focus on and see what progress we're making and what impact are we able to get out of that process. So that's the second point. On the third point, one was looking at the broadening access of funding to support businesses in all provinces. So it's actually a point which I thought will be quite important to focus in that way, because the issue of access of funding to support businesses, one actually is looking at that. It always comes from members to say, are we looking at all the provinces? But there are always certain provinces which are looked at as provinces which are actually getting benefit over and above other provinces, which we may be neglecting by lack of a better term. So the next point one was hoping for is ensuring proper use and management of funding channeled towards the targeted interventions. Remember, we're actually facing a bit of a challenge of abuse of resources. One was actually hoping that we can be able, in ensuring proper use and management of funding channeled to targeted intervention, we can be able to actually run through those projects, because we actually identify an intervention and we can be able to say, we are sure that in the resources and the funding channels that are actually given to these specific intervention, we're facing these challenges, we're making this progress. I think it might actually be important that we actually have a look at that, because interventions are quite crucial. And at this stage, we may actually have to make sure that we single out that intervention, that issue, to be able to actually take the process forward. The final point, DG, I think it's more on the monitoring of the effectiveness and of the impact of support against the set of objectives. There's a set of objectives that we actually agreed to, but at this stage, I think on our part, we may want to look at the monitoring of the effectiveness and of the impact in terms of those set of objectives that we actually agreed upon or decided on in terms of department and entities. So DG, I thought maybe one will pick up on these 5 areas and be able to say, we have received presentation previously, and having received the presentation, I think there are topical issues that we agree upon and we have actually identified in the reporting that we get from the department and ministry. And we think on our part, it might actually be quite important to create a structure of engagement where for the continuous engagement that we will have and oversight as the portfolio committee, we can have those, for lack of better term, I'll use those blocks, 5 blocks which I've identified, and maybe on the basis of that and find a way on how we can actually be able to process the detail and be able to update and give feedback around those issues. So on my part, it's actually a comment, Gigi, it's not questions, but one was actually looking at a point of saying, we should have a way forward and look at actually a better way, because we are at level 2, and being at level 2, issues of livelihood have come up. But on our part, the focus which needs to be very strong should be on the economy moving forward. And I think at this stage, at level 2, we do actually pick up lots of issues. And there's actually a short quotation which I actually read somewhere where it says, places are open because of the economy, not because it is safe. Keep that in mind. Wash your hands, wear a mask, keep social distance, avoid crowds, stay safe, your family needs you. DJ, I'm sure we can actually check if ever there's any further questions, Secretariat, and if ever there's any further, we'll just pick up on that, and then DG try and the team try and conclude around that matter in terms of our presentation. Secretariat?
Chair, let Mr. McPherson and Mr. Thring ask a question, then I'll raise Ms. Mantashe's question that she has, Chair.
Okay, so let me ask you to raise Mantashe's question, and can we and then go to McPherson and Thring, please, just to be brief.
So should I raise Mr. Mantashe's question first before? Okay. Ms. Mantashe just wanted to, she's saying that manufacturing has been hard hit by the lockdown, which is the backbone of the economy in the Eastern Cape. And she would like to know how will the DTIC stimulate the sector, the manufacturing sector in the Eastern Cape. Then Ms. Mantashe has raised a question, I think that has been answered by the DG as well as Ambassador Karim about the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. She wanted to know what was the process and when will it be implemented. And I think the question has been answered, Chair. And then she was just making statements, but those were the 2 questions that she raised, Chair.
McPherson and Honorable Thring.
Thanks. Just a quick question, Mr. Hannibal. How much money has been spent by the Solidarity Fund on this project? You said that they've made the money available. Can you just tell me how much money they've made available?
Thank you. Honorable Thring.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I didn't get my question answered with regards to the NGOs and money allocated to the different NGOs. How much was allocated and how was that process actually vetted? And how do we go about allocating funding to the different NGOs? Secondly, I also didn't get an answer to my question with regards to our NEF exposure. I've been covered, I think, on the ventilator aspect. Thank you.
Wonderful. Can I then ask the DG and the team to actually round up on the questions?
Thank you, Chair. And I've taken notes of your comments and suggestions about a way forward, and also around further oversight around the efficacy of the different programs, and to what extent we've been able to preserve our industrial base, or at least save companies. Chair, Honourable Mantashe, very briefly. What we have done, we have set up a structure with the provinces, and we've had quite a few engagement already, and we will be having a further engagement before the end of the month. But with regards to Eastern Cape, we, as you know, we're working on a number of sectors with the province. The one sector, obviously, because it's the biggest sector there, is the automotive industry. So both with Volkswagen in East London, with Ford in PE, with Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen in Uitenhage, Mercedes-Benz in, we have been working with them, and then we've been working on the agro-processing sector, and which covers areas like Queenstown and others, but we're also reviving the special economic zone within the Wild Coast area. We are also working, as I indicated, with the industrial parks in the area around Tata, around Dimbaza, and so forth. But we have set up a structure with a technical MINMEC with the provinces to be able to work together, both on the companies in distress, and then secondly around the revitalization of our SEZs and our industrial parks. Chair, we will come back to Honourable Tring on that question of the NGOs. I take it he's referring to the NGOs that have been supported by the national lotteries and so on. And I see there is, on the 2nd of September, there is also a presentation by the National Lotteries Commission and the DTIC, and we could perhaps ensure that he gets a response to those questions. Chair, but as I indicated, we are working very vigorously to get the recovery underway. And as I indicated, we have convened with all the other departments. We have convened to proceed with our the different master plans for the different industries, steel, digital economy, agriculture, agro-processing. And I can say there is quite everybody. The program is back on track, and we hope to shortly announce a few more master plans so that we can deal with the question raised by honourable members about the revival of our manufacturing sector. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. If ever there are any further comments, Chief Economist and any other comments, they're all covered. Okay, thank you very much. So can we actually then conclude on the session?
Sorry, did I miss the amount of money from the Solidarity Fund?
Sorry?
Did I miss the money that's been given to this project from the Solidarity Fund?
Okay. DG?
Chair, as I indicated, that no money has come out of the department, but I'm sure we can get that money from the amount. Actually, there's a media statement that has just been issued today by Sidwell to give a progress on the Solidarity Fund. I don't know if that's issued, but we'll check, but we will send through the amount that Solidarity Fund, unless Stephen knows it offhand, if he's back online. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So,
no, I don't.
Or is it Hannibal?
Chair, if I may, just to mention, I don't know the exact amount. I do know that around about 11 million rand was spent on the development costs of the ventilator, but that's not the total amount that was spent. So if the committee will allow us to come back with a written and comprehensive answer, we would appreciate that, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I think we can then proceed, Secretariat, because I think at least it's actually concluding the first session of our program. if we can actually move on to the next one, and just thanking the DG and the team for their presentation and engagement. Secretariat?
Chair, we'd just like to get the time frame for when we can get the response back from the written response back from the department, Chair. If we can get it by Monday or Friday, by Monday, Chair, just to put it down, the timeline for the response.
Oh, DG. DG.
Chair, could you just, if you don't mind, could you just repeat that?
Okay.
I didn't get the last part.
Andre?
Chair, it's just that we'd like to have about when can we receive the written response that Stephen just indicated that that the DTIC will provide?
I think we can provide it by Friday for the latest, if not in the next few hours. I was just checking the media statement to see if they've covered the amount, but we'll definitely by the latest Friday. Thanks.
Okay. No, thank you very much. Thanks, DG. Can we then pick up on the next item?
Chair, I'm sorry, Chair. Chair, my apologies. Just on the loan guarantees, did I hear that government has actually guaranteed those loans on the 200 billion loan guarantee scheme? The lady that spoke, I'm sorry I didn't get her name, but I think I heard her saying that government has actually guaranteed. That obviously conflicts with what we are hearing on the ground. But I just wanted to know whether there is that guarantee from government.
I think the Chair, if I may, I think what we were referring to, there's the 200 billion rand fund, which is managed by the Reserve Bank National Treasury, which is, as I said, the way that system works, or let's say in theory it's supposed to work, is that government stands as a guarantee. That means they allowing the banks to give the banks, or to ensure that banks will lend in this difficult period. They guarantee the banks, and they stand as, let's say, a surety for the company, that if the company doesn't pay back the bank, the government stands as a guarantor. So that is how they created the 200 billion fund. It's a guarantee fund which provides security to the normal banking sector to on-lend to companies. That is the purpose. But as I said, because of the amount of we've always been telling Treasury, because we've been managing schemes like this or schemes similar to this, is that you must be very flexible, and the real purpose is to get liquidity into the economy, because that's what causes recessions and depressions. But as I said, some of their demands, correctly as put by Honourable Tring, has been too onerous. And therefore, the fund hasn't been utilized fully. But I do understand that they are going to reduce the amount of conditionalities so that the fund does work better.
Okay. All right. Thank you, DG. Honourable Tring, I'm sure you answered.
Thank you, Chair. Yes.
Yeah. And then I think we can actually then proceed, Secretariat.
Chair, the next item on the agenda, Chair, is dealing with the committee business, the committee program, consideration of the draft program. You've requested that we look at the program so that we can give a program in dealing with the remitted bills, Chair. And if we can just flight the program on screen, Chair, it will be quite useful. Chair, what we propose, and I think based on the discussion yesterday, I think there was a view that maybe the committee should get a briefing by DTIC on the Copyright and Performance Protection Amendment Bill, a broad briefing for the foundation, especially for members who have not been part of the 5th Parliament, Chair. And then we're proposing after that briefing, Chair, that we deliberate on the reservation, specifically in relation to the procedural reservations only, Chair. And that procedural reservations deals with the tagging, and it deals with the public participation, Chair. Now, in dealing with that particular reservation, Chair, especially the tagging, we are advised to confer with the corresponding committee in the National Council of Provinces, Chair. but there's no prescript on how now this conferring should occur. What we have done in the past is that the chair would write a letter to the chairperson in the NCOP about the tagging issue, or alternatively, we can have a joint meeting where the issue is being discussed. But that's a decision that the committee must make, Chair. However, just on that matter, Chair, we must stress that the issue of classification, the final decision resides with the JTM. The committee can only make a recommendation on that correct classification on the remitted bills, but the final decision resides with the JTM, Chair. So that's what we propose, and following that, the next day, Chair, we will then continue our deliberations on the reservations, Chair. And in that, during that process, the lead will be Advocate van der Merwe, who will guide the committee through that process. She will provide the committee with the opinion, the legal opinion, and ultimately the committee will then deliberate and seek consensus on the way forward on each of those reservations, Chair. We've also scheduled, if Marco can go up, that we do not know whether the committee will conclude this deliberation. So we've scheduled the first and the second as possible alternate additional days for such deliberations, Chair. So before the committee finally decides on the way forward.
Okay. Let me then actually request the members of the committee, portfolio committee, because it's actually the discussion we had yesterday is just making sure that we create an approach and programmatic kind of approach. So let's actually then get the committee just to allow us to proceed in taking the 4 days with the detail suggested. I'm sure we will actually get much clearer after our first session on the 25th and 6th. Maybe we'll have good sense with the other 2 days on how far we can be able to go and what will be outstanding. Can I just check with the members if ever there's any comments they have? We're just trying to block space to actually start the discussion and allow the engagement for the remitted bills before us as the portfolio committee. Can I take comments from members? Honorable members.
Chair, I don't have a problem with the program that was presented by Andre. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Thring. I'm sure there will be actually agreement or support to Honorable Thring so that we can be able to proceed as proposed. Any seconder?
Seconded.
Honorable Hermans, second Thring. I'm sure there's no objection. Thank you very much. I think, Secretariat, we will actually then proceed as actually suggested on what we actually got the committee to agree to right now. I'm not sure if ever there's any further issues we'll have to pick up on the committee business. Secretariat?
Chair, there is a set of minutes that was distributed for adoption, Chair, is the minutes of the 28th of July.
Can we actually then get the minutes flighted, honorable members? We did actually have the 28th of July. If we can actually just check if ever the members are actually okay, because it was the briefing. We actually did have those agenda items listed. Those who are present, you can scroll down, are listed. I'm sure members will be able to have a look at that. We did circulate the set of minutes. The different political parties were represented, and there was an apology as well on the first page. Can we proceed scrolling down on the second page? We did actually have the DTIC team, and we actually did have the introduction, and there were different issues raised. under introduction, which is up to 1.7. And we actually did have the adoption of the agenda with the apologies and briefing by the minister on the ongoing crisis of the steel and sugar industry. Those are the issues which actually were listed below. We can scroll down to item 2. Then we actually had the resolution. Committee resolved that the members should submit additional questions for written responses if they wish to do so. And there was actually the issue of committee business. Listed were the issues which actually are listed particularly about the NLC chairperson, further informed the committee on the letter projects funded by the NLC to all committee members, and then we can proceed further consideration of minutes, further of the different dates as we actually have them. And we did actually conclude our meeting, and we adjourned around 11:37 on Tuesday, 18 August. I'm sure that would be, that's the follow-up meeting. Can I just check from members if ever there's any corrections they'd like to do on the minutes, because if they were circulated, I'm sure you have received them. And if ever we actually have agreement, can we actually get the mover and the seconder for the adoption of the minutes, honorable members?
Chair, I move for the adoption of the minutes as presented.
Honorable Hermans move. Can we have a seconder?
Let me second, Chair.
Okay. Who's speaking? Is it Mutau?
I think Mr. Mutau.
It's
Okay.
Yako.
It's Yako. My apologies.
Oh, Yako. Okay. Thank you.
They both have small voices.
Honorable Yako seconds. I hope let's check if ever there's any objection. In the absence, can we then actually agree to the minutes? Secretary, I'm sure those were the committee business issues that you put on our program.
That's correct.
Allow me to actually thank the members of the committee for their participative involvement, and our meeting is adjourned. Next meeting, Secretariat?
The next meeting is next Tuesday, the 25th at 9 o'clock, Chair.
Thank you very much, honourable members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you very much, honourable members.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you.